I was speaking with someone one day and I said, oh, he wants to go to Toronto and all that. And I said, do you know in Toronto you can be paying for a one-bedroom set, you can be paying close to like 2,000, 3,000.
Yeah.
And I was like, is that per year? I said, per what?
If you see me outside, just squeeze some funds in my hand because the cost is much. I'm about starting the express entry process with my boyfriend. Okay. Do you recommend express entry with a common law partner?
Very good question.
This is Young and Abroad. Oh shit, let's go.
Hello and welcome to the Q&A session or segment of this episode. So we're still talking all things immigration, moving to Canada. So if it's something that you are considering doing or you know someone considering doing this, you definitely want to stick around. I have with me here Olu of Canada.
Hi everyone.
So we'll be answering some questions that you guys asked. So we put out a poll and a few of you sent in questions that you wanted Olu to answer. So we're just going to get right into it. So first question, this person says, I came to Canada in January 2024 to start my program. I later found out that the agent who did my application didn't pay the tuition deposit he claimed he paid for me. This has placed me in serious financial difficulties as I had to use my other savings to pay for the semester. I am now contemplating taking time off to work and save up to start my program later. Am I allowed to do this? Oh my God.
I empathize with you on that situation. It speaks to some of the things we've mentioned in the new recording episode of the podcast. So if you've not watched that, please make sure you go back and watch that episode. Because again, immigration in Canada is regulated and it speaks to some of the things that unregulated consultants do and take more. I mean, why would someone give you the money for their tuition deposit?
No, that's wrong.
But the deed is done already. In terms of taking time off your program, Canada allows you to take study leave of not more than 150 days.
Okay.
Approved by your school. You can take that time off. You have to talk to your school and present the reason why you want to defer the next semester or take that study leave. But you must return back to school within 150 days. You can't take time off more than 150 days. That's the first part of the question. The second part, however, is that even when you are on a study leave, because you are not enrolled in a program, you are not allowed to work. So that's just the, not too good part of it. If you are overwhelmed with your program and all that, you can take time off. But because you're on a study leave, you are not enrolled in classes, you are not allowed to work. You are only allowed to work as an international student in Canada when you are actively studying, you're enrolled in classes, or during your scheduled breaks, like summer breaks and things like that. So, but if you are overwhelmed, you want to take some time off, you have some health reasons, you can talk to your school to give you a study leave for that.
Okay. That's a tricky one because if they can't work, I guess they will just have to keep working during school, kind of like what you had to do. Right. Well, you didn't really have to do it, but
I was doing it to make more money.
Right? And you said you had 2 jobs, correct? While still studying. So maybe explore that option. In the previous episode, Olu also mentioned about the duration that you are, or the hours that you're allowed to work while studying. I think he said about 20. It's going to be increased. 20 hours.
I think the also good thing about that is that 20 hours is actually for off-campus work. So what a lot of students are able to do is if you're able to get off-campus work outside of your school for 20 hours, you can do that. And then also talk to people in your school. Maybe you can get something within the university that can give you extra income as well.
Okay, I think that would be the best route for them, right? Okay, so sorry to hear that. Honestly, that really sucks. But wishing you all the best on your journey and in your study. So this next person says, I arrived in Canada with my spouse as the spouse of an international student. Interesting. The initial plan was for him to study while I work, and we both apply for permanent residency later on. Things haven't quite gone well with our relationship. There have been serious issues before we moved here, and we've made a decision to stay separate for now. Can either of us go ahead with our PR application separately without including each other in our separate applications?
I mean, that's another very, very tough one, and my heart goes out to you. I empathize with you on the current situation of things with your partner. Generally, there are certain categories of international students that their spouses can get a spousal open work permit to come to Canada.
Okay.
They get to work full time. They don't need a job offer to get the work permit and all that. But the duration of the spousal open work permit is tied to the duration of the status of the student. So if the student gets a 2-year study visa, the spouse is also on a 2-year spousal open work permit.
Okay.
But if you've both determined that you are eligible for express entry, nothing requires you to apply for PR together. So if they are both separately eligible, you can do your own PR application. Your spouse can also do their own PR application. However, this is the however part of it. Even when you're applying for PR separately, you can decide to make your spouse unaccompanied. That's what the law calls it. It means they are unaccompanied. You're still your spouse. You're stating in your application that they are your spouse, but they are not part of your PR application. That's what it means to be unaccompanied. So that the law gives room for you to both apply separately and still state your spouse. Since I'm guessing there's no divorce or permanent separation yet, so maybe they're just away from each other for some time. But keep in mind that even when your spouse is unaccompanied, there are some certain documents you still need to get through them to present. About 3 key documents. Number 1 is your spouse still has to do a police report. Your spouse still has to do a medical test, and you still have to show proof of fund for that spouse.
Oh, wow.
The reason why IRCC requires those 3 things is to determine the admissibility of that spouse. Because when it comes to PR application, the inadmissibility of the spouse renders the other spouse inadmissible as well. So they want to determine that, let's say in the future, you now want to sponsor this spouse that is unaccompanied to become permanent residents in Canada. Are they admissible into Canada? No criminal record, no medical record that can impact the application and things like that. So create that channel of communication, because in some ways you still need some things from each other.
Yeah, so it's still kind of tied together, but not fully tied. She can just get, or she or he can just get, documents from the other person. Okay, thank you very much. Because when I heard that question, I was like, okay, how would there be a solution? But we have Olu, so there's definitely a solution. So this next person says, I'm about starting the express entry process with my boyfriend. Okay. We've done all the necessary documentation, and we are just waiting for his educational credentials to be out. He's also writing the French exam in July. Do you recommend express entry with a common law partner?
Very good question. So, for those that do not know, Canada recognizes common law. What is common law? In immigration, common law is when 2 individuals have come together. They are not legally married. They've not done court wedding and all that, but they've been cohabiting together for at least 1 year. They've combined their household. They have documents to show driver's license carries the same address. They have rental or mortgage or properties in their name. They have bank accounts together and all that. They have the common law form they signed that shows that for at least 1 year they've been living together. With that, you can apply together the same way that people that are legally married can apply. In express entry is allowed. In other immigration pathways in Canada, common law partnership is allowed. As long as you have the necessary document to prove that you are partners, and it gives you the same thing, the same immigration privilege that those that are married can also get as well.
I was just going to ask, what are the benefits of them going the common law partner route as opposed to just applying as individuals?
It's the same thing, as opposed to individual, maybe to save them cost. So if you look at proof of fund, for instance, the proof of fund for 2 people together is lower than each of them applying separately. I can't remember the number right now, But two people together is more than one person, but it's not as much as each of them applying together individually.
Okay.
So that's part of it. But also generally, maybe somebody has a better profile that can help the other person. Like the partner is learning French. That is fantastic. It will give them more points and all that. So probably those are the things they are putting into consideration. But yes, the law allows that. You have the necessary documents. You can prove it that you've been cohabiting. You have the documents to show that you're good to go.
Okay, amazing. Thank you. So next question says, as a newcomer or PR, which province is the best place to stay in terms of rent and job opportunities? I am in a licensed occupation in Nigeria, so working in my profession is out of the question for now. Which area can make the transitioning easier?
That's a very good question. Again, it's relative. It depends on, did they mention the occupation they are in?
No.
So it's going to depend on the combination of things. But if you're coming with family, they look at places that are family friendly and cheaper. Some people look at things like weather. You understand? Some people look at cost of living, of rent, of buying a house. If you want to buy a house, let's say comparing Ontario and Alberta, it's cheaper for you to buy a house in, let's say, Edmonton and Alberta compared to like Toronto, Ontario. You understand? So they also look at things like the job. Like, where is my job in demand in Canada? Like I mentioned earlier, there's on the job bank, Government of Canada job bank, which is jobbank.gc.ca. There's an Outlook tool there that you can use to explore where your job is in demand in Canada. It's going to give you insights on like wages, how employers view people with experience in those areas. This person also mentioned that their main occupation is regulated.
Yes.
So what other areas do you have the skills and experiences that employers are looking for, transferable skills that you can use? What type of occupations are you looking for, pending the time where you will get into your licensed occupation and all those things? So those are the things to put into consideration. It's not a straightforward answer to give, except we get these other details from you. But if you're thinking just, let's say, generally in terms of like cost of living now.
Yeah, because they mentioned rent.
Cost of living, rent, you're probably looking at places in the prairies and Western Canada, places like Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Alberta. A lot of people are moving to Alberta right now. Things are beginning to get, expensive, but it's still not as expensive as Ontario.
Yeah, I was going to say definitely not
as expensive.
Definitely not Toronto.
Definitely. No, I make a joke. Anytime I make this joke on social media, people, Ontario people, they feel I don't like. I mean, Toronto people in particular. And I say, except your job is in demand in Toronto, or you are coming in with huge funds. We hear Toronto.
Run. Literally, we are in Toronto, because I'm literally in Toronto, and I can definitely attest to the fact that it is expensive.
It is expensive.
Rent, everything, groceries, everything. It chokes.
It's expensive. So you can look at those other places, cost of living, especially with housing. I think housing is what a lot of people spend money on. And that's one of the things I advise newcomers, have a budget, think ahead, ask questions, go on Facebook Market. If you're looking for a one-bedroom apartment, you use that to have an idea. I was speaking with someone one day and I said, he wants to go to Toronto and all that. And I said, do you know in Toronto you can be paying for a one-bedroom, you can be paying close to like 2,000, 3,000. Yeah. And I was like, is that per year? I said, per what? This is per month. So you better know what you are doing. So have a budget. Have an idea of what the living expenses and then look at, even if you're looking at the job, look at the wage and say, is this smart? Martin? Those are part of like the preparations and planning you have to do ahead.
Yeah. And even if you want to look at Ontario, like Toronto is super expensive, but there are some neighboring cities that are much
even
better.
In the GTA,
in the GTA, exactly.
All those places, although they are getting expensive now, but it's still not compared. Toronto is ideal. We give Toronto a separate country.
If you see me outside, just squeeze some funds in my hand because the cost is much. Next question This person says, I am sending this question from the UK where I'm currently on a tier 2 visa as a care worker. I have applied for permanent residency in Canada and was approved. Oh, that's
Okay.
good. One of the reasons why I'm delaying my move to Canada is the fear of starting afresh. I also feel stuck in the UK as my career progression has been delayed. The care worker status in the UK was to get COS after my study. Not sure what that means.
So COS should be certificate of sponsorship.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
okay. And there are other career paths I'd like to pursue. I feel like I'm eating my time staying in the UK, but I'm also afraid to start all over again. What advice do you have for me?
That's a very, very good one. And first of all, congratulations to you on getting your permanent
Yes.
residency. Just going to chip in quickly that maybe, and I'm guessing, this person also probably used the healthcare pathway to get the
get the
permanent
PR.
residence in Canada, because the work experience they're doing in the UK counts as that.
Yeah.
One thing I'd like you to also keep in mind is that the fact that you got your PR through the healthcare category doesn't mean you have to be in the healthcare category when you get to Canada.
Oh,
Because
okay.
it's a federal program, the flexibility is there for you to choose other career pathway. On the other side, the certificate of sponsorship and the tier 2 visa they have in the UK constrains them to the employer. So they have to remain with that employer in the UK. And I think that's probably why they felt they are wasting some of their time. Maybe there's something more they want to do outside of the care job. My advice to you would be to face the fear. You have the PR. Canada also gives you the flexibility to come in. You don't need to remain permanently. Come and do your landing before your confirmation of PR will expire. Use that opportunity to look around the country for opportunities and people and network, and then start thinking of, the things you can do in the Canada, the career areas you want to focus on, and the opportunities that are available. But you've done a good job getting that PR. You just have to face the fear and, think of how you can integrate yourself into the Canadian society as well. And there are so many resources to help you as a newcomer. Check for arrival resources, check for pre-arrival resources. There are also pre-arrival resources already paid for by the government of Canada.
Yeah, thank you very much. I feel like that answer was very, very good. And I would also just say, don't be afraid to start over. In life, you would find that sometimes you think you would be going a certain path and you have everything planned out, and then, one thing leads to another, and that kind of changes. So you have to be willing to be flexible and, like Olu said, explore Canada. You don't have to move permanently. You can just come in, look at the resources available, and look at the options you have. You also don't have to stick with the healthcare career path, like he said.
Right.
So you have many options available. Actually, you're in a very good you're in a very good position, trust me. Okay, so this person says, I'm coming to Canada for a 1-year study, and I know my program is eligible for a 1-year work permit. I need your advice on what I can do to put me in a better position to stay longer in the country and in status as I continue to push for PR, since I'm doing just a year program. I know it won't be an easy ride, but I just want some heads up on what I can do. Thank you.
Fantastic. I like the fact that the person is actually thinking ahead, because he or she, I don't know, rightly said, if you do a 1-year program, you get a 1-year postgraduate work.
I did a 1-year program, by the way.
and it's, it's not impossible. Let me put it out there.
Yeah.
It is not impossible to get PR within that 1 year. But you have to think ahead of time. You understand?
100%.
The way I like to put it for people is that the 1-year postgraduate work permit is a race against time. You don't have the luxury of time to play around.
True.
So you want to, number one, know the PR program you are eligible for. There are tons of immigration permanent residence pathways in Canada. Get the necessary documents that you need to get ahead of time. If it's in your own situation, you need a job offer to get your points up. You want to know that you are not waiting until you graduate before you start looking for a job.
Yeah.
If you're doing a co-op program, for instance, leverage that, do well in your co-op, work towards leveraging that to get a full-time offer.
Yeah.
You understand? Some of the things you also need about like 5 or 6 other documents. If you're getting points for your previous education from back home, do the education credential assessment for that ahead of time. Do your language test, ahead of time. Even if you did not do that to study in Canada, you need to do that for your PR application. If you have work experience from back home that are eligible that you're claiming points for, start talking to those employers that you need the documents from them. That's also very, very important. Number 4 thing, start putting money aside for things like your police reports, even your medical test, if you need to do another, your application fees, because those are costs that, add up. If you're owing money to your school in Canada and you need to still get your transcript, your account is on hold and things like that, make sure you're ready to clear that ahead of time as well. So those are some of the things to put in place, and of course know the PR route you're eligible for. Like I mentioned earlier in the episode, you don't even need to finish a program in Canada before applying for PR. You understand? So look at that. Maybe you are even eligible already. Maybe you have previous work experience in one of those categories that you can quickly even put in your application. Get into the express entry pool ahead of time. It is doable, but you have to buckle up and be ready to do the work.
100%. Thank you so much for that. And just to add a bit, I also was in a 1-year program, and I also applied for my PR while still in the program. One thing that helped me though was that I have a professional accounting qualification. So that counted as having another bachelor's degree.
Right.
So that gave me
2 or more degrees on diploma.
Yeah. So that gave me added points for the pool. So you can, look at all the requirements like Olu said. You might have enough points to apply for PR even before your program ends.
Right.
Another thing he said, which I also did, was to start to apply for jobs before my master's ended. So before the master's ended, I had a job offer. So I also applied for work permits.
Right.
So I made sure like all angles were, covered. So I had my PR application. I also had my work permit application before the end of that 1 year.
Right.
So thank you very much. Let's move to the next question. This person says, I'm 36 and HND holder in my first year of a 2-year diploma in Canada and have done WES evaluation for my HND and OND certificate. Please, what other things would you advise I do in preparation for permanent residency? I am in one of the Atlantic provinces.
Very, very good. I think it ties to the question on the person coming for a 1-year program. So just listen to that. Some of the things you need to get ahead. I think they said they've done their degree assessment. The one thing to add to that quickly is that if you have OND and HND, when you evaluate the two, it gives you more points than a bachelor's degree alone.
Oh, wow.
A lot of people don't know, because people say, HND, they don't value them. So for those that probably don't know what ONDs and HNDs are, they are diplomas offered by polytechnics in countries like Nigeria. OND is ordinary national diploma, and HND is higher national diploma. So if you evaluate the two, you send it to an organization like WES, they actually evaluate it as 2 or more degrees, which is something that somebody that has a bachelor's degree and an extra certification like you did in their time, but it's more point than having a BSc alone. So which means you are even well positioned. So look at the work experience, the other things you need, check the express entry. If age is the concern, because one thing to add is that the express entry, you get more points based on what you have except for age. Once you get to 30, you start losing points. About 5 points, 35 points, 31, 5 points, 32, 5 points. So this person mentioned they are 36. So they would have lost some points due to age. But the express entry is not the only PR program. They are in Atlantic Canada, fantastic. Look at the Atlantic Immigration Program. The Atlantic Immigration Program is available for students that have studied in the Atlantic provinces. Newfoundland, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island. You know, the good thing about the student category of the Atlantic Immigration Program, it doesn't require work experience. For the international student category, once you've studied for 2 years in that province, there's no work experience requirement for you. So, but there are other requirements.
Okay, this is an interesting question, but I'll ask it. So this person says, what will a child below the school age of 5 or 6 be doing while in Canada?
Childcare. They go to childcare. They call it daycare. Things like daycare.
Yeah.
So that's what they will be doing. And that's a very fantastic one for people who are thinking of immigrating to Canada with family members, their dependent children. Keep in mind that the school age for children also varies by province, but it's usually between 5 and 6 years before they can go and start school in Canada.
Okay.
But prior to that time, they can go to daycare. So they are private daycare, they are government daycare. Government daycare are subsidized. In some provinces, they've signed an agreement with the federal government right now. It's about $10 per day just to reduce the cost for family members. But they also have a long wait list. So if you're planning of moving to Canada, your visa is already approved, start reaching out to those
schools
daycares right now to know what are the requirements and all that. But that's what children that are still not up to 5 or 6 years and not of school age can do in Canada as well.
Okay. Yeah, I know those wait lists can be crazy long. Okay. This person says, how can an immigrant get a trade certification without attending Canadian schools, e.g. Red Seal?
Okay, that's a very good question because the trade sector is one of the sectors that, we have a lot of in-demand positions in Canada. So trades are regulated professions that require license to practice. Things like plumbing, electricians, carpenters, and the like. They are regulated in Canada. About 20% of Canadians work in the trade sector and in regulated profession in the country. However, one thing to keep in mind is that we have 10 provinces and 3 territories in Canada. Those provinces have licensing body for those occupations in each of their provinces. So you have to find out which province do you want to go to, find out the regulatory body in that province, find out their requirements. So you may not, in some cases, you don't have to have gone to school in Canada, but you probably have previous experience. You can gather all those things, the requirements. Those are the things they will ask you. They prove that you are licensed from the country you're coming from and all those kind of things. But the place to get the precise information will be which province are you going to, which organization or regulatory body is responsible for that trade occupation within that province, and what are the requirements for them to give license to somebody, a foreign national that has experience in that area.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I honestly did not know it was possible to even, get certificates without going through the training.
It's trade certification.
Okay, that's really good. So we're on our last question. So this person says, if someone submits a reconsideration application to a refusal, while waiting for the outcome of the reconsideration, can one make a fresh application while waiting? The reconsideration is over a month, but background checks are in progress since submitting the request.
Okay. For those that do not know, reconsideration is you've applied for visa to Canada, your application was refused. You have now applied for reconsideration. It's not a formal appeal process. It's different from judicial review. Judicial review is when you're approaching the court and challenging the decision of the visa officer. Reconsideration is that you are making a kind of like a compassionate appeal to IRCC to say, I received the refusal, but I believe this does not apply to me. I'm appealing to you to relook at this application and reconsider it. So people do that, you submit a web form, people do that through members of parliament and all that in their writing and the likes. Generally, IRCC says don't put 2 applications together under the same category. What I mean by that is submitting 2 student visa application. Because it says it delays the decision making and all those kind of things. But if you've done a reconsideration and you've not heard back from them in months, there's every likelihood that they're probably not reconsidering your application. So that may be the time to start looking at maybe applying again. You can also raise a web form or do a GCMS, apply for GCMS mode. GCMS is Global Case Management System. It's like Canada, it's like iCloud. That's where Canada stores all the information on your application and everything. And the law allows you to make an application for the GCMS mode to see what's going on, what's
What
delaying it,
stage
are they
they are.
reconsidering
I
it
think I've done
or
that.
not?
Yeah.
So you can do that just to have a final idea of like, okay, is it time to move on and do a new application? Also, consult with professionals like lawyers and licensed consultants to get their own view on things as well.
Yeah, I think I agree with Olu. I feel like it's definitely a good time to consult with a professional.
Yeah.
Just to see, I guess, the best route. But yeah, so those are all our questions.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Olu, for sitting with me. And yeah, we're on all podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify. So make sure you follow and drop a review as well. And also the video version of this podcast is on YouTube on everything Eniola. So check us out and subscribe. Appreciate it. And also follow Olu on all social media platforms. I'm going to put the link in the description. So make sure you connect, and I will see you guys in our next episode. Bye.
Bye, everyone.